Hey everyone, how's everyone doing out there in Final Cut Pro land today? Not much happening this week, is there, so far? Everybody's still waiting on Final Cut Pro to get updated, whether that's 10.4.9 or 10.5. I know I check every so often. Let's see what's going on there now. Oh, there is my desktop. Here we go. This is what I wanted to show you. All right, let's see. Final Cut Pro 10.4.8 is still there in the App Store. Now notice it says 5 months ago. 5 months ago. That's correct. Let's check the updates section. No updates. No updates. At least that's so far. So I figured what we'd do today, we've had a lot of comments about what you'd like to see in Final Cut Pro 10.5. So what we're going to do today is go over listener requests for Final Cut Pro 10.5. Apple does listen to these shows, so they are listening. I say that as a matter of fact. It's actually not. There's the Final Cut Pro Radio HQ headquarters rear window live cam. We'll switch that out every once in a while to see what's going on outside. Bird feeders there, you get to see that. So, any news? Nathan says, at least they're consistent, right? Consistently not delivering. Listen, here's what I think is going on. Obviously, the coronavirus situation has affected everybody, but Final Cut Pro 10.4 was already 27 months old before the coronavirus took effect in like late February, early March. So I think they've already been working on something like that for quite a while. I mean, 10.5 for quite a while. I don't think that it may have delayed the implementation of Final Cut Pro 10.5. That's a possibility. But I don't think it has completely set it back. I think what's happened, let me just check here something. I'm checking on the good old YouTube. There we go, top chat. I think possibly, we'll go over this. We're going to go over all the listeners, all the Final Cut Pro community requests for 10.5 in this episode of Final Cut Pro Radio Live. But I think possibly what is happening was they were figuring on releasing 10.4.9 around NAB. This is a guess. They were just figuring on 10.4.9 with some new features around NAB, and then NAB didn't happen. And then they said, well, why don't we wait and just get 10.5 ready? Now, they may have previewed 10.5 to NAB. We don't know. We'll probably never know one way or the other. But if they were going to release 10.4.9, or if that's the release, there should be features with that. It's not just going to be a bug fix after all this time. That just would not make any sense. But since Logic had 10.5 come out 2 weeks ago, I think we're going to see 10.5, Final Cut Pro 10.5. That's my best estimate. And I think we'll see it between now and WWDC. So let's go over let me just pull these notes up that I have. There we go. pulling these up. I got to pull these up so I can look at those while I'm talking to everyone. So let's see here. So first off, let me go over some news, Final Cut Pro news. So there was the Z-Cam came out, right? The Z-Cam, it says Z-Cam E2 M4 Micro Four Thirds Professional 4K Cinema Camera came out this week. I think it was on Monday or Tuesday. And it shoots ProRes RAW over HDMI to the Atomos recorder. The interesting thing is, it's only $1,500, $1,499. Now that's just the body, of course. That's not with the lens and the Atomos recorder and everything. But still, that's the first camera that I know of at that price point that's recording ProRes RAW. So that's pretty cool. ProRes RAW seems like it's going to be getting some more adoption here. That's one of the first cameras that I've seen, even though it's still over HDMI, that shoots ProRes RAW at that price point. How many of you are shooting in ProRes RAW? I know a lot of you are shooting in B-RAW. That is one of the main requests that we'll be seeing here in a minute from the listeners. So, let's go over that list. We got a comment from Sedgwick. Check the Nikon. Oops, I can't do that there. Let me do that over here. He says, check the Nikon Z6. It shoots ProRes RAW with Ninja 5. And Peter says, waiting to use ProRes RAW, but haven't taken the leap quite yet. So ProRes RAW is certainly interesting to me, for sure. However, right now I'm shooting on a GH5, and the files, I can shoot 5K internally on the GH5. Now that's H.265 HEVC, so I'm kind of spoiled with the file sizes of the GH5, the HEVC files. Let me just put that up. I always forget to turn something off. So I'm kind of spoiled with the GH5 HEVC files. I can shoot 5K internally. So if I make the jump to ProRes RAW, at some point, probably it's going to happen. I'm not sure when. I mean, I'm not really in the market for a new camera right now. Like I said, I can shoot 5K on my GH5 internally, 5K. My iPhone shoots 4K, the Pro Max, 11 Pro Max. Red shooter, more robust color controls with red is wanted, absolutely. Peter says, also the S1H will support it any day. I'm also shooting with GH5 camera for now, and also having trouble making the switch, especially native Micro Four Thirds lenses. That's another consideration. I have probably half a dozen, maybe 7 or 8 Micro Four Thirds lenses. However, at this point, I'm very satisfied with the GH5. The next camera I get, it's going to have to shoot great low light, similar to what the Sony A7S III does, or whatever that camera, that low light beast does. So I'm probably going to have to switch lenses at that point and go full frame. I'm presuming, not positive, but I'm presuming. I will be curious to see what the GH6 brings to the table. It's way overdue. 3 years, I think, since the GH5 was introduced, and 2 years since the GH5S was introduced. But, I'm shooting file sizes with really great quality at about a quarter the size of ProRes RAW. Now, I'm not shooting for film. I am doing some documentaries, but most of the footage is already shot for both of them, and it's H.264, H.265. So I'm not shooting documentary. I'm not going to film. I'm not going to have this massive color situation happening. Peter says, same. Have you tried the Voigtlanders? They're all at f9.95 and pretty amazing. I haven't tried the Voigtlanders, right? Voigtlanders. I am shooting with the Sigma 18 to 35, which I get f1.2 on with the speed booster. So that's my favorite lens by far, so far. But I'm not going to buy any more lenses right now unless I see a great deal on it at Micro Four Thirds. I'm just not buying anymore. I have to see what happens on the camera front, what the GH6 does, what the S1H. I'm going to probably be going full frame though. So I will probably be switching my lenses at that point. Let's get to some of users' requests. So, what's in your wish list for Final Cut Pro 10.5? Look, if you notice, it has 83 comments on this one thread. There's a lot of activity. Now, a lot of these you've seen before. Some of them will be repeats, but I'm going to pull up the ones that I pulled out. Better audio mixing tools, built-in tracker. Yes, we've all seen that for sure. So, built-in tracker. Now, better mixing tools. I think we're going to be getting better audio mixing tools for sure. 10.5. I think we're going to finally get a roles-based mixer. It's been a long time. Look, they're doing something, right? They're doing something after all this time. Final Cut Pro 10.4 is 29 and a half months old at this point. 29 and a half months. Yes, they've done some other updates. That's absolutely true. Peter says, yes, if audio rolls could act as submixes, that would be amazing. Well, they won't act. That's coming. That's got to be coming. Better audio in Final Cut is absolutely something that I expect to see in this next update. The interesting thing is Logic 10.5 came out 2 weeks ago. We haven't seen an update to Final Cut Pro for almost 6 months. Let me just double check. I keep checking while we're on air. No, it's still 10.4.8. So we haven't seen it for over six months. I mean, almost 6 months at this point. It was like mid-December or late December, something like that. So we haven't seen it for 6 months. So it's due, and WWDC is happening. Well, obviously they're up to something. It's just a matter of when they're going to release it, right? 10.5. It could be 10.4.9. If it's 10.4.9, that means 10.5 is just not quite ready yet, and it's going to be even bigger than we expect. But I think it's going to be 10.5 at this point. They're taking their time to get it right. Everybody's talking about the iPad, Final Cut Pro on the iPad. Brad Olson and I did a live Final Cut Pro Radio TV live during that about a few weeks ago, right? Yeah, we did one a few weeks ago. So we both came to the conclusion that, yes, we expect Final Cut Pro TV, Final Cut Pro 10.5 to be coming to the iPad. The question, I guess, is when that is going to happen. That's the main question. When's it going to happen? They might preview it at WWDC. Who knows? I mean, LumaFusion is a fantastic NLE for the iPad at this point. I'm a big fan of LumaFusion. So what is Final Cut Pro on the iPad when it comes? What's it going to be? Don't know. It's not going to be as powerful as Final Cut Pro on the Mac Pro. What are you going to do with all the plugins? I have 1,000 plugins at this point. What are they going to do with all those plugins? So if Final Cut Pro does come to the iPad, or when it comes, if it comes, look, last year they previewed the Mac Pro at WWDC. So, and they said at that point there'll be a new version of Final Cut Pro coming out in the fall, which happened. So if they preview an iPad version of Final Cut Pro, it's going to be scaled down from the full version. It has to be. It can't use all the plugins that Final Cut Pro has. I don't see any way it possibly can. It has limited amount of memory, for one thing. I have 112 gigabytes on my Mac Pro. Right now I'm down to 85 gigabytes, but I'm running a lot of programs right now. So we said we have a comment, better color grading is needed to stop the need to finish and resolve. Just copy the good stuff from Resolve 16, to be honest. Okay. They should add command post abilities. That would be the collaboration stuff, right? That would be the collaboration stuff everybody's talking about. Peter says, would love more detailed keyframing ability as well. Definitely a lot of space to improve there. Another nice thing would be the ability to favorite projects. That's interesting. Besides favoriting projects, I wish that projects were searchable. I mean, favorites were searchable in the bin if you rename them from their renamed, not just as favorites, but if I rename a favorite, I'd like to search by that renamed name, not just the fact that it's a favorite. I know I can do a smart collection for favorites, but I want to be able to search if I rename a favorite by that rename. Apple just might show Final Cut Pro on iPad with new iPad release to market the iPad. They just had a new iPad release, right? The iPad Pro. I seriously can't edit on an iPad now. Too much footage usually. That's correct. So the iPad version of Final Cut Pro, if they show it at WWDC, is going to be a limited version. Hollywood's not going to be jumping for joy because Final Cut Pro is on the iPad. It's more for what's going on now, people working from home, students coming up, those kind of things. I mean, obviously, especially if suppose 10.5 comes out, when it comes out, it has a free iPad version. It might be a paid version on the iPad store. That's fine. I mean, on the App Store. Simone says, I think it will be released around WWDC in June. If we don't see Final Cut Pro 10.5 before WWDC, I certainly expect it to be shown at WWDC. Previewed, but I think we're going to see it. Do you think there's any competition between the Logic team and the Final Cut Pro team? I think there is. Bill says, plus technical color grading abilities for Adobe Photoshop style plugins. The new iPad that comes out in 2022 version, Final Cut Pro will be used to market it. That's 2 years away, or a year and a half away. Everything is at 0.5 at the end now, except for Final Cut Pro 10. Cloud-based media and collaboration. Yes, absolutely. So let's go on to some more listener requests. You guys can keep bringing those in here. So, better mixing tools. Yes, absolutely. I think that's a no-brainer at this point. AFF export, keyframes, interpolations, better LUT support, and better roles management. Well, I think we're going to get better roles management with an audio mixer. I think there's going to finally be a master. I mean, look, all these years we don't have a master volume control in Final Cut Pro 10. You can't just grab a fader and bring the volume down. Doesn't exist. 9 years. Of course they're working on that stuff. Kenneth Stevenson says, live online collaboration. If you remember in Final Cut Pro 7, they had that available. I'm not sure how many people used it, but at this point in time, with all the collaboration online, come on, FaceTime group FaceTime chats, it would be fantastic to see that. Gary Frailberg says, scrolling timeline. Yes, that's a big thumbs up for me, of course. Peter Hoogland says to conform multicam edits and original files. We had that in Final Cut Pro 7. So I like to see collapse multicam available. So if you're done editing it, it's not permanent, but you can go back to the original multicam clip. But I like to see collapse for sure. Audio effects on lanes. Absolutely. That'll be in the roles-based mixer. Not better, but complete integration of motion. So if you remember, in Final Cut Pro 7, you could take a motion project, drag it to the Final Cut Pro 7 timeline. It would sit there in its own, just say like a little compound clip kind of a thing. It would just sit there as a Final Cut, as a motion project. It would play back exactly through, just like it was done. But you could double click on it or right click on it and open in motion. It would take you to motion. You could make an adjustment, save it in motion, go back to Final Cut Pro 10, it would be updated. That would be fantastic if that happened. Joe Castellano, dupe detection, tracking, extend a compound clip without stepping in, ability to move keyframes past the end of an existing cut point. That would be interesting. So yes, a better keyframe editor for sure. I've compared Final Cut Pro keyframing has some really cool features. I like the ability to drag multiple clips together as a single unit around if I have to in the video, what do they call that? Video lane. I like that, but it's nowhere near as powerful as the keyframe editor in Motion. I wish they could bring that over somehow, or a version of that. Simeon says, I think Final Cut Pro will be renamed as Final Cut Pro without TenorX. And I think I'd like to see more audio features, Puppet Tools, Audio Tracker, and something like After Effects right in Final Cut Pro. Well, they're not going to do something like After Effects. I think that's going to be Motion. Whatever. What are they going to do with Motion? Right? What are they going to be doing with Motion? Motion's not been updated that much. Integration with Logic would be great too. I'd settle for better at this point. Yes, that's an issue. So Logic 10.5 came out 2 weeks ago. One of the details in the Logic release notes said better support for Final Cut Pro XML 1.9. There's no Final Cut Pro XML 1.9. Final Cut Pro XML is at 1.8. That's a little hint that something's coming for the future. It sure seems like it would be 1.9 will be available with Final Cut Pro 10.5. Now, here's the thing about what's going on there with that. Logic, even at 10.5, only exports Final Cut Pro XML, FCPXML 1.5. It does not export Final Cut FCPXML 1.7 and 1.8, which is what Final Cut Pro 10.4.8 uses right now. Doesn't do that. Logic only needs the audio information, doesn't need the video information. So everything that's in the video information, from what I understand, Logic Pro does not, it strips it out of the XML file. It doesn't use it, so it strips it out. So going back and forth is virtually impossible right now. Logic only uses the audio portion of the XML file. That's from what I understand and what I've found out. So we have a comment. Thanks for the show. I believe Apple will release a FCPX remote app for the iPad. That would be fantastic. The Logic remote app is very, very popular, and it has tabs. You can go from one screen to the next. So it has faders on one screen, another screen. It'll have a full UI of the plugin that you're working with that you can mess with. It's been 9 years, and there's no companion app on the iPad to Final Cut Pro. So maybe that's going to be part of a package where you buy the or they give you Final Cut Pro on the iPad, and also a companion app if you're using the desktop version. I mean, how many of you would use Final Cut Pro on the iPad? I would certainly play around with it, but I'm not going to be doing my main projects when I have a Mac Pro sitting right over here. I'm not going to be doing anything big on it, not initially. It's not going to be as powerful. I'm going to need my plugins for one thing. And also, I have LumaFusion that I'm using right now for the iPad. Some color stuff, linked custom curves, splines for curves. I didn't know they didn't have those. Tracked masks. I've heard that. Improved keying, contrast pivots. What else does he say there? Log wheels. I'm not sure what log wheels are. I guess wheels, color wheels in the log. More reliable U-slider, metal GPU acceleration, etc. Well, metal acceleration came with 10.4.7 7 or 8 months ago. That was what was that called? That was version 2 that came back in October of last year before the summit. Peter says, it would be great to able to start audio before video for any videos in a secondary storyline. As of now, the video must be the first thing. Audio can't pre-lap. If you put a slug at the beginning of that, right, at the beginning of your timeline, you could have audio pre-lap under that slug. That's the way I would do it if you wanted to do that. Timeline colors on top to better show chapters. Absolutely. We had more colors in the browser and the timeline, and they took them away. Rough edits in the field, maybe. Yeah. So I expect the initial version of Final Cut Pro on the iPad to be a limited version, rough cuts, whatever they want to do. I think it'll be pretty cool, though. It might be limited. I mean, it might be limited to the iPad Pro. Don't know. It might be limited to the iPad Pro. Not too much on iPad LumaFusion with XML transfers. Fine. Cedric says, I'd like to use Final Cut Pro on iPad for people that have an iMac and no laptop. The iPad Pro running Final Cut Pro would be nice. Absolutely. I definitely think it's coming, and it's just a matter of when. If it doesn't come by WWDC, then I certainly expect a preview at WWDC. Touchscreen editing probably won't fully take off until iMacs or touchscreen and the iOS and Mac become one and the same. It would have to be really light proxy. It also would have to probably allow you to access files on an SSD natively, not going through the Files app, which slows everything down. Right now for LumaFusion, that's one of the problems. So it's a matter of when an NLE such as Premiere Pro, DaVinci, or Final Cut Pro comes to the iPad, who is going to be first? Well, you already have LumaFusion. I mean, people say that all the time, so we'll see what happens there. Let's do GPU effects were moved to metal, but many effects are still mostly on the CPU, on the CPU. Let's check the backyard cam. No activity. No activity in the backyard cam. So here we go. Let's see. Logic would be great too. We saw that one. Dual timeline. This is an interesting one. I've heard people argue about this. Listen, don't argue with people if they want a feature. Why argue with them about it? But I've seen people argue with, especially with this dual timeline. It's, I don't think we're going to see a dual timeline, but people want it. So Craig Collar says, ease in and out on keyframe animations. Yes, better keyframe like the one in motion. Agreed. So right now, you can't change the default behavior of keyframes in Final Cut Pro 10. which is aggravating because they have that little S-curve, weird little thing that goes on. When you add a keyframe, it automatically has this weird little S-curve, and you got to go in and change that to linear. So those kind of things, why can't you make the default behavior linear in Final Cut? Click on a preference, make default linear instead of that little S thing that does its motion and its speed and everything. I don't like that. I never use that. I always have to go and change it. I've changed that hundreds and hundreds of times over the last 9 years. Garrett says, I don't think Final Cut Pro 10 will come for the iPad. LumaFusion is way ahead. I have to agree with that, but I think it's inevitable that it comes. I can't see it not coming. But when is the question? I would like to see Simon says, well, I'm not sure what you'd like to see there, Simon. Let's go back to our slide. Better motion integration, better browser find source. So better browser find source. Oh, you mean from the Finder? I'm not sure what you mean there. Shortcut for moving a selection on the primary storyline to the next previous cut instead of cut, paste, or mouse dragging. Final Cut Pro is pretty mouse-centric a lot of times. Options for the index menu. Now we can only isolate all video only, audio only. It would be much more useful if I could isolate clips in the index with effects applied, clips transform applied, slow fast motion applied, compound clips, multicam generates, etc. And reveal in Finder straight from the timeline. So reveal in Finder straight from the timeline, what he's talking about is right now you have to do a Shift F on a clip in the timeline that takes you to the browser, and then from the browser you can right click and say reveal in Finder. But you cannot go from the timeline directly to the Finder to look for a clip. I would like to see an application like Apple Shake as the new motion. Do you think they don't seem to be spending that much time on motion? All the updates seem minor compared to Final Cut, and for me that's okay because I don't spend much time in motion. It says, the people will argue, feels less necessary to have dual timelines though, since favorites are such a beautiful thing. That seems like something we need more in Premiere since it's the best way to pull selects. I agree with that. I thought about the dual timelines, and you pull one timeline, something from one timeline into the next. One thing I would like to see, though, is the ability to add one project into another project timeline. So I can pull a project from the browser and add it to a second project timeline to have both of them there. In Final Cut Pro 7, you can either add the actual project to the timeline, or you could hold a key modifier, Option or Command or both, and it would just drag the clips. It would change when you were dragging to just the clips, and you could drag those down to the timeline. Speaking of projects in the browser, why can't we scrub a project in the browser? 9 years, and we cannot scrub a project in the browser. It seems ridiculous. You can scrub a compound clip. You can scrub a multicam clip. Of course, you can scrub regular clips. And you can scrub the project file when you go to the Share menu. Little icon, you can scrub it to see what you have, but you can't scrub it in the browser yet. Maybe that's coming in 5. So Nathan McAvoy says Shift-Command-R from timeline works fine. I have to try that. I guess to reveal in Finder. Okay, well, that's something I didn't know. I was right-clicking on things in the timeline, and there was no option to reveal in Finder, so I'll try that. Shift-Command-R from timeline works fine. Double match on a compound clips, first to the compound clip, second match to the original clip. Right, double match. That's absolutely true. Yes, please. Let's go back to our other list here. So we can do, number 3, we can do Reveal and Finder straight from the timeline, apparently with Shift-Command-R, and that'll take you directly to the Finder, apparently. That's good to know. The ability to extend a connected clip using a keyboard shortcut. And tabbed projects and the ability to close them. Absolutely. I really, really don't like the arrows on top of the timeline. Arrow, left, right. You don't know what, if you have a bunch of timelines open, you don't know which direction to go and you get lost. And sometimes it'll completely, the timeline you're working on won't even be available anymore. I'd like to see tabs on the timeline with a little X. You can close that project right from the timeline. It's much more efficient directly clicking on a tab than looking through the arrow. I know you can press and hold it and the list comes down. Oh, that's the wrong side. Let me go to the other side. Click and hold and the list comes down. Or you tap, 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 tap to get to your timeline. Just a tab with the name of it right there. Single click. I'd like to see that. Nathan McAvoy says, oh, you're right. I always use the shortcut rather than right click, but it isn't in there. That's strange. Yes. So reveal and Finder directly from the timeline is. So Shift-Command-R, that's good to know. Thanks for that tip. Amen. Tabs seems like a no-brainer to me. It's much more efficient. Single click is much more efficient than click and holding on an arrow or clicking the arrow multiple times. I can look at the timeline, see the one I want to open, or close and just click on it. Single click. Want better HEV CPU encoding. Handbrake encodes looks better than compressor. What about compressor, guys, gals? Final Cut Pro also needs hardware encoding for 10-bit HEVC. So interestingly enough, super slow with CPU encoding. My Mac Pro has hardware encoding for HEVC. I'm not sure. I mean, that's a lot of money, but it has it. Nathan gives us a thumbs up for giving him credit for that, but tab project in the timeline, absolutely, I'd like to see that. The ability to extend a connected clip using a keyboard shortcut. I do like tab projects. I'd like to be able to stack them too. There are times when a pancake timeline setup would be nice. So here's the thing about the pancake timeline. There's not a whole lot of room right now to do that. But if you remember, they used to have a project library at the bottom of the interface where you could see your projects, your timelines, and you could click on them and scrub through them and stuff. So maybe that would help. I'm not sure where they'd put a second timeline in Final Cut. Well, I'd like to see it. Sure, with everything else, that's fine. It's not, I don't know where they would put it. That's the problem. Peter says, it may eat up more CPU or memory with project tabs is the only concern. I'm not sure why, because they're there anyway. They're just hidden behind arrows and drop-down menus. So you're thinking if they're the project tab, give us an alias to it. Don't make it the full project. I mean, the thing is, it's much more, a single click directly on the timeline, a project tab, would be much more efficient than click, hold, drop down. Where is it? Forward, backwards? I can't remember. I've had situations where the timeline disappeared. I went back and forth too many times, and all of a sudden it's not there. And I have to go back up into the browser, find it, and double-click it to open back up again. That's another thing. I think compressor only supports H-bit hardware HEVC encoding. I think you're correct. I don't think they've added 10-bit hardware encoding yet. That seems like something that's very, very possible. Let's go back. I would like it for it to be released. I've seen that a few times. We just want it released, whatever it's going to be. Leo Hans said something like that this morning on a different forum. In Premiere, it starts to slow down when you have too many tabs open, bins especially. I'm totally for tabs, just trying to think they would have gone to the route if they did. Okay, that makes sense, but the little X next to the project tabs means you could click it and close it. Simple. Click, close, click, close, click, close, click, close. How do you close projects in the timeline now? I don't even know how to close them. Open up a new timeline, it just adds to the bunch. I'm not sure how that would work. I mean, I know how it would work with tabs. There'd be a little X there. You click on the X and it closes that timeline. Hi from the UK, would like a clip highlighted in color if you drag it from the Finder into the browser. Well, yeah, colors in the browser would be most welcome, and the timeline as well. Let's check, see if there's any birds. There's no birds back there. This is my Rode Wireless Go white pair that I got recently. I bought a second set. I like them so much. So people say the Rode Wireless Go, I've had the black ones since they came out. I think I got them right away, tested them out. They're $200. And for that price point, I really, really like them. They're very, very convenient. And there's a lot of things you can do. I've done a few videos with them. I'll be doing some more using them with the iPhone. I've used them with Ecamm Live specifically, but I'll be using them with the iPhone. But, so people say, well, do you like them? I say, yeah, well, I bought a second one. That's what that video was. I bought the second one. It came in this week. So, let's see here. Nathan says, McAvoy, tip for the guy talking about a clip highlighting when dragging from the Finder. If you first open the event that you're dragging to, then drag it to the browser, you will have the yellow box around it. Joe Delano, better visual cue on match frame and icon view. Hard to see where the yellow box is on long clips. So one of the things that I find aggravating as the dickens is when you do Shift F from the timeline, if you have a lot of clips in the browser, you can't even find the clip that's highlighted. It doesn't even show you where it's highlighted. And I know there's a fix for that in Command Post, but I want it natively. Why wouldn't you bring that clip forward and highlight it so it's very easy to see which clip was a Shift F? Thank you. Let's go back to our list. I'd like for it to be released. Many people have said that, that's for sure. Now, this is an interesting one. This is one that I think that I can agree we just don't need. Ability to import Premiere and Avid projects natively. That's not going to happen. I doubt that very much. Not unless Premiere and Avid change and they allow FCP XML export. Default and/or custom settings for browser columns that are recalled every time new event is created. Well, like I said, so when you set spatial conform, when you set your audio channel preference, why can't you save those as default? Right in the inspector box. When you change it, little checkbox that says make default setting. Same with column layouts. Same with column layouts. Peter says, yeah, it's a bug. It is a bug. It's just weird that it's been around for that long. Speaking of bugs, so this week I was going through, as a matter of fact, somebody on Twitter asked me if I knew why some of the text lines in the browser became bold. And then they were not bold, and they were bold, they were not bold. And initially I thought it was they became bold when you transcoded them. I transcoded them and they became bold, but then they weren't bold now. That's a bug. I checked with Apple. That is a known bug. So when text becomes bold in the browser, it doesn't refer to anything. Very interesting. All right. Built-in planar tracking, integrated audio mastering tools like Resolve and Highlight. Well, you have the integrated mastering tools somewhat. I mean, you have the plugins from Logic. You have the plugins, the mastering plugins. So I think what you mean is a better audio mixer, roles-based mixer, or whatever. Peter says if you do the command twice, it will bring you to the desired clip highlighted in yellow. Thank you. So if you do Shift F twice from the timeline, is what you're talking about, Shift F, it brings it up, it brings it to the proper clip. It's, once again, there's a lot of clicking involved in Final Cut I wish wasn't there. Nathan McAvoy says, yeah, Richard, that's annoying. There's an issue with if you reveal in browser you have skimming on, and when you go to move your cursor in the timeline, the yellow box in the browser will go white. A search field, it goes back to blank after you go back to the timeline, please. Making it very hard to see which clip has the bounding box. Yep. Simple border effects gets cropped when the clip is cropped. Why wouldn't they just allow you to crop an image and maintain the simple border? Sam Bowers. I'm not sure if you're going to get built-in planar tracking. It seems like it's a specialty that would be maybe a plug-in or an extension would work. Collaborative editing. Nobody said that before. Of course, everybody's talking about that. Team projects and remote collaboration. Adobe has Apple Beat right now. Hopefully, it won't be long. I've heard there's problems with that, though, right? With Adobe's version of collaboration. They've updated it 3 times. I'm not sure if it's working. Peter says, yeah, you have to go back to the clip in the timeline, click and do the same command again. Annoying, but it ends up working. So if I have a clip selected in the timeline and I do Shift F, it jumps to the browser. It should jump to the browser and highlight the clip. But I just stay in the timeline and just do Shift F twice. Is that what it is? Or I got to go back and forth? That would be aggravating. Sam Bowers, use trim instead of crop for your issue. Crop feathering. Joe Castellano. Adobe and the word issue just go hand in hand. Adobe should be renamed Adobe Issues. Yes, well, perhaps that's true. Support for Blackmagic Raw. Now, nobody wants that, right? Everybody wants that one. Everybody, all you shooters, I mean, I put it on my list. I don't shoot Blackmagic Raw, but I've heard it so much, and it seems like it's a no-brainer to get it support. They just need better raw controls in Final Cut. An easy way to cross-dissolve audio. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's amazing after 9 years, there's still no cross-dissolve in Final Cut Pro, no native one. So in Logic, I can have, in Logic, I can have 1,000 clips on one track. 1,000 clips. And I could click a checkbox and add a cross dissolve to every one of the clips with a single click. I can do fade ins, fade outs, or cross dissolve on every clip in that track with a single click. And I can choose how many milliseconds I want it. It's simple. It just does it instantly. And you can change them multiple ways. In Final Cut Pro, you still can't do a proper cross dissolve. And I'm not talking about tricks and workarounds. I'm talking about natively in the app. It's amazing to me that hasn't happened after all this time. 9 years. 9 years. Reverse match frame and dupe detection. Dupe detection, of course, a lot of people want that, especially documentary filmmakers. Of course, our friend Sean Lander wants that. Reverse match frame, so that would be from the browser to the timeline, I guess that's what you mean? Yeah, I can find, that would be handy. I want to retain my browser view, keyword collection, and filters when I match a clip back to the browser. When I match a timeline clip to the browser, I'm back to looking at the entire bucket instead of my selected view. And of course, scrolling timeline, that's the second time we've had a request for that. Built-in tracking, round-tripping with motion, better keyframe controls, multicam, clip, conform to original. Sean Lander, speaking of Sean Lander, he's Mr. Dupe Detection. Whatever it is I want it to be substantial. If there is no justification for this long stay of absence, I will be bitter. I'm in the middle of an edit, so I can't watch, but here's my list. Please discuss, and I'll check back. Batch syncing, better audio mixing with rolls, convert multicam to sync clip, or vice versa, better media management, especially preventing duplicate clips, rename files in Finder 2. Can't we do something like that by just highlighting all the audio clips and hitting Command-T? You can't cross-dissolve between them. You don't cross-dissolve audio clips in Final Cut Pro. There's no built-in cross-dissolve. If that works, I would be Command-T as the default transition, but there's no cross-dissolve transition in Final Cut. No cross-dissolve transition, so I don't think so. 2 stories, secondary timelines for audio trail out and trail in? No. I don't think so, Nathan. I don't think there's no cross-dissolve, so Command-T wouldn't work. If I'm talking about just the audio, not the video. There's a bird at the feeder. Looks like a little starling. By the way, I've got 3 cameras set up. This is my main camera. It's a GH4, actually. And then I have this camera. And then I have a new camera, my overhead camera, so I can demo things. There's my Stream Deck. Here's my audio interface, you can see. I have a physical mute button, which I love. that I leave on occasionally by mistake. And of course, here's my keyboard. So Nathan, so what is Command-T default transition if not a cross dissolve? I'm talking about an audio cross dissolve, not a video cross dissolve. One to fade the audio, so both clips, one comes up and one goes down. The audio portion by itself, just the audio. I can't select audio and do a cross dissolve is for the video if I'm not, unless they've changed something. So am I. I'll have to check that. I haven't been able to do cross dissolves in Final Cut without. I'm not talking about a fade in and a fade out. I'm talking about a cross dissolve. Well, I'll check it. Check it out. Nathan says, yes, when attached to a video clip. I see. Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's an issue. It's been 9 years and there's no audio cross dissolve. That's what we're talking about there. No natively, and of course there is in Logic, but Logic's not a NLE. Logic is a DAW. So let me go back to let me go another couple more requests. Ability to link music edits to each other, not the primary storyline. That's interesting. I would like to see that as well. I like the ability to link. Like if I had two clips that were related to each other above the primary storyline and I wanted them to be related to each other, I like to link those two together so those two move as unison, independent of the main storyline. But now, yeah, you can put them in a compound clip, but I don't like jumping in and out of compound clips. I use compound clips for something like that, but not for, sometimes I find them effective, but I don't like jumping in and out of them all the time. I like to have one button solution to doing the overlap and cross dissolve head and tail method. I made a macro to do it with one shortcut, but I would love to see it built in. Yeah, these things you're all talking about, we're talking about things being built in, absolutely. Batch syncing, better mixing, audio mixing with rolls, convert multicam to synced clip or vice versa, better media management. A used in sync or process clip collection, rotate clips in event browser for GoPro content. DCP creation. Now, this is getting to be a little bit out of a DCP creation. I don't think is in the realm of nonlinear editing. It seems like that is a specialty that you can do outside of Final Cut. But better easing in and out for keyframes, simple bare bones library like the backups. I'm not sure what that means exactly. Keywording a synced or multicam clip assigns the keywords to the clips inside to native aces. I'm not sure what that means. Movable markers, absolutely movable markers. Yes, you can move them with a keyboard shortcut, but just why can't you just click and drag a marker and then be able to move it one frame at a time with the keys? Display storage space for events, exporting time remaining. And I think you can do that in Compressor. You can option click on the time and it goes from time accumulated to time remaining. Craig says, my Final Cut Pro 10 wishlist, roles mixer, absolutely. Being able to place a project sequence within another, yes, absolutely. Native AFF export capability. So I didn't realize you can't, I guess I did. So Logic uses AFF, right? AAF, I mean. They import that because I've imported a transcript into Logic with AAF. Sequence markers, absolutely. We don't have sequence markers, we have clip markers. The markers always are stuck on a clip. I would like a sequence markers as well, both. Not one or the other, both. Being able to scrub and preview projects in the event viewer. Absolutely. We talked about that earlier. I need a motion tracker for mask titles and photo photo video footages. Audio editing, dissolves, interframe editing, rolls, Logic plugins in Final Cut Pro is really high quality and very robust. You don't have this level of audio editing possibilities in Avid, by the way. That's interesting. That seems about right. DCP is appropriate for compressor. Speaking of compressor, how is the compressor for going to look like, the update, whatever version number it's going to be? Compressor needs an update as well. Let's just check and make sure. See, they didn't update this. Sneak an update in. No, they did not. That would be project markers. That's correct. Project markers, sequence markers that stay in the timeline. Final Cut Pro has all this blank space in the timeline above it where you could do things. How about a little checkbox on there that turned proxy on and off instead of going up to the view menu and scrolling down and up and down and up and down? That would be one of the things I'd like to see, a little proxy checkbox, but also markers in that blank area. Absolutely. BRAW, absolutely. Dupe detection, scrolling timeline. That's a third request we've had for a scrolling timeline. Browser column editor. Redesign compound clip and transition editor. So I'd like to see the compound clip open up directly in the timeline so you can see the relationship of the compound clip to everything else in the timeline. Right now, it takes you to another timeline. You have no visual relationship to the master timeline. No, none, zero. Open it up directly in the timeline instead of jumping to another timeline. Improves setting for watermarks and compressor would be nice. So right now, they're not that great, I presume is what you're saying. I've used them once or twice. I know I've burned in time code. I'm not sure if I've burned in a watermark in compressor. I'm not sure. Easier access to opacity fades, Joe Castellano says. So the way they have the audio fade in and fade out on the audio clips, I'd like to see that built into the Final Cut Pro timeline on the video clip. I don't want to go to the animation lane. Just right on the clip itself, an audio fade in, audio fade out, little handle there. And make those little things, those little buttons less fidgety. Right now I go back and forth. I got to zoom in and expand the timeline to get them. Ability to have only some clips in proxy view. I can see this done by selecting certain clips with the index and then clicking a checkbox somewhere. So yeah, when I'm working in 4K video, which I do almost exclusively, the proxy files are 1080p. I'd like to use those in a 1080p timeline, mix and match proxy and non-proxy. I guess that might be complicated. Jorgen says movable markers, absolutely. Some more listeners, readers, community. Collaboration, and collaboration. That's from Michael Matzdorf. Collaboration. I'm not sure. What do you think collaboration would look like in Final Cut Pro 10? Everybody wants it. I'm not sure how it would look. I'm going to move this over a little bit. There we go. Collaboration, I'm not sure if we're going to see that in 10.5 or not. Don't know. I absolutely don't know. Stabilize multicam clips directly in timeline. There's a lot of things we like to see in the timeline directly rather than jumping around. Improved playback of 10-bit Lumix clips. Built-in motion text tracker, native Insta360 video playback. Yeah, so there's a problem with 10-bit, some of the 10-bit files from the GH5. Nathan McAvoy says, partial proxies would come in handy when using mixed codecs, for example, HEVC with ProRes. I don't want to have to proxy my ProRes also. More available colors for roles like Logic does colors for audio lanes. Absolutely. Logic has a limited color palette, but it still has a better color, way better color palette than Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro has a earthy, crunchy California color palette. You can't even tell the difference between some of the colors are so close. So I'd like to see them borrow Logic's color palette. It's much better. Video cam stabilization. Hello from Miami. Alfredo. I don't want that. There we go. So, Chris Hawking says, from Command Post, I don't think we'll see 10.5 in the next couple of weeks. We'll see how that goes. I think we'll see 10.4.9. We know R3D and DNX HD on Metal is coming. My guess is they'll announce 10.5 at WWDC as part of their Pro apps are coming to iPad announcements, but I won't actually ship until later in the year. I think we're going to see 10.5 personally. I don't see why jumping to 10.4.9. I mean, if 10.5 is that far out, perhaps. But in any event, 10.4.9 will be a feature update. They'll have some features in there for us. Keyframeable transform tool for more precise speed control. Multicam stabilization would be nice, but I can see the trouble in it. For example, you change the angle and the new angle doesn't require stabilization. Well, wouldn't that stay on the angle that you're using it on, I would presume? I'm not sure. I don't use stabilization that much. I've used it a few times. How about a selectable overview of the entire timeline under the viewer like LumaFusion and the MacBook Pro has? Chris Hawking says, this has been built into Final Cut Pro since day one. You can enable it in Command Post, not sure why they've never enabled it. So that would be like a little overview of your entire timeline. LumaFusion has this under the viewer, and the MacBook Pro has it. And it's always the entire timeline. You can zoom in and out, make selections and stuff, and it would reflect in your main timeline. Of course, they could work around that stabilization of the multicam, that making it angle specific. That would make sense. That seems like that would be the way to work around that. So, what else do we have here? I got a little package in the mail the other day. I'm sitting on this right now. That is Luther. Luther, our gray Russian cat. It's one of our cats. We have several. He snuck in there when I was away. That's my new chair that I'm sitting on right now. I got that. It's always nice to get packages when you know something that you could use in the studio. My old chair, I have these bar stool height chairs. I have right now this desk. It can go up and down. It's a motorized standing desk is what it is, and I can take it up and down. I have it up higher. I'm always used to being on bar stools with wheels. But I have two of those downstairs in the recording studio, and I have one up here. And I realized the other day, the one I have up here is just hurting my back, so I got a better one. That's what that little video was. So I think we're getting towards... John Alper says, native motion tracker selection, better round tripping to logic and motion. These are my dreams. Rolls-based mixer, yes, that's got to be there, right? At this point, better proxy options. I agree with that 100%. Better proxy options would mean resolution, frame size, resolution, and codec. I'd like to see H.264, H.265 as an available proxy. And then, of course, spectral analysis. I haven't seen, is that in any NLE? I've seen it. Digital Performer has that. Logic doesn't even have that, not built in. Send to motion, anything in the timeline. LUFS meter, a limiter for broadcast audio compliance, dupe detection, AI tool for quality control for mastering. And I think that's the end of our list. Those are people on Twitter and Facebook groups that submitted things over the last month or so. Jog button for moving the playhead, especially the full screen viewer. Film strip under the viewer with individual frames allow for more precise cuts. So I'd like to see, one of the things that I said I'd like to see is having, right now when you're working, yeah, you can expand the viewer all the way across the screen and put it in film strip mode and stuff, but it's not, I like to use list view, film strip view. I'd like to see a combination of those two. And what I thought was you could have a mode where you click on a clip in the browser, and instead of the timeline, it would be a clip logger that would open up all the way across the bottom. You could zoom in and out. You can set markers, you can set favorites, you can select ranges and keyword stuff, but it would be where the timeline is now, just a clip, specifically a clip logger timeline. It's very specific for making more precise selections in the browser. It would just reflect whatever clip you were on. If you change the clip, the timeline would change, the browser, clip logger would change to that new clip, and would only reflect changes. If I did a range selection and favorited it, it would affect the clip back in the browser. Because right now you click on a clip in the browser and the timeline's not doing anything. It's just wasted space. Especially when using two monitors. Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a 34-inch LG monitor, my main monitor, which is right here. And then to the side, I have a vertical monitor. I have a vertical monitor turned 90 degrees vertically. There's a bird. I'm not sure what kind of bird that is. Oh, it's a little woodpecker. It's a little tiny woodpecker. little fight there. So that's my backyard. I'd like to not need to click first to activate the interface on the second monitor. And a Final Cut Pro 10 t-shirt. I'm sure that's coming. Everybody gets 10.5, gets a free t-shirt, right? That's got to be one of the things that... Let me pull this desk up a little bit. I changed my position. So that would be one of the things that's coming with Final Cut Pro 10.5. I'm sure they're working on those right now. Anybody else have any requests? Let me see if I have anything else over here. One of the things that be aware of as you're waiting for Final Cut Pro 10.5, back up your application in the applications folder and back up any important libraries you're working on, just in case the new version changes things and you can't go back. You want to zip those. Don't just press, don't just press the button automatically. Let me see. I think that's just about it today. So that's good for Final Cut Pro team, the ProAts team, to watch this video and they can see the kind of things people want. The other thing is send your requests in to Final Cut Pro team via the link, right? Via the link. A way to preview all of your clips and shots in a storyboard fashion. Resolve has a version of this. It's really nice to use. Something like that would be great in Final Cut. So, absolutely. Torgrim Grimstad, hi from Norway. Just in and run, bam. There you are. Hi to everybody. Hi, Torgrim. Which link? I'm not sure what that means. But anyway, we have this FCPX.tv. All things Final Cut Pro 10. Waiting on Final Cut Pro. There's your buddy. He's waiting on Final Cut Pro 10.5. So I have an article there that's talking about waiting on Final Cut Pro 10.5. I have some feature requests, audio, compound clips, advanced preferences, timeline, toolbar improvements, transition audio auditions to stack out and try several transitions on an edit, etc., etc. Also, you can go, that's on fcpx.tv. You can also go to Final Cut Pro Radio, FCPRadio.com. You can see Final Cut Pro 10.4 is 29 and a half months old at this point. A long time. Torgrim says, it is Corona lonely here in Norway. Hopefully that's coming to an end. Hopefully. Super useful website. Thank you for doing this. You're more than welcome. So I have this website I started when Final Cut Pro came out 9 years ago. If you go to the main site, first off, you can send your requests or feedback to the FCPX team there. Just click on that and it'll take you right to a place where you can go to send your requests. You don't have to remember complicated URLs and stuff. It's right there. You can also try Final Cut Pro 10 free for 90 days. Just go right there. These are right at the top of the page, fcpx.tv. Simple to remember. Right on the main page, they're both right there. So, waiting on Final Cut Pro 10.5 is what I just showed you. That's this one. Before you update to Final Cut Pro, back up. master list of Logic Pro 10 resources for Final Cut Pro editors. So Logic Pro has a free 90-day trial, which you can find here. And it has all these resources. I recommend Groove 3 for Logic training. It's the most extensive Logic training available. It has many, many, many Logic courses. Course Ripple Training has some. Mac Pro Video, Logic Studio on YouTube. There's some places you can go. Logic Masterclass, blah, blah, blah. All kinds of stuff. Once again, that's on fcpx.tv, master list. And there's some other things here for Final Cut Pro that you can access, fcpx.tv. That's my main site for Final Cut Pro stuff. Torgrim says, how long till there will be a Mac Pro upgrade, do you think? I think it'll be years. Ability to V-key a fade to see, also control at cut, center on cut, and end on cut option. Absolutely, this sounds like some things we can do. My name is Richard Taylor, everyone. I have another video shoot this afternoon that I'm going to have to get ready for. Where can I find Final Cut Pro market share? You can't. You can't find the market share. How many seats? Well, they announced 2.5 million seats 2 years ago. Tim Cook announced that Final Cut Pro downloads are at an all-time high based on the fact that they gave away a 90-day version during the pandemic shutdown. Everybody had that. 2.5 million 2 years ago at NAB they announced, so 3 million, 4 million. It would not surprise me if they mention the market share at WWDC. I expect it to be between 3 and 4 million seats. If it's over 4 million seats, that would be phenomenal as well. But I'm going to head out of here, everyone. I've got to get ready for another shoot this afternoon that I have to do. I'm taking my GH5 and trusty microphones and things. But I sure appreciate everybody stopping by. I do these for you guys and gals. Not just guys and gals, both. I do these for you. Thank you for your time, and thanks, Richard. Sure thing. Let's just check the bird feeder. There's a starling, I think. I think that's an old starling there. Before I head out. What do you think the probability of a version on iPad or a version of Logic coming to the iPad? I think the probability is pretty high, but I don't know when. Scott Markowitz says, hey from Naples. How you doing, Scott? By the way, don't forget to subscribe over there at my YouTube channel. YouTube.com, Richard Taylor TV. Same on Facebook, although I don't accept friend requests on Facebook. It's better to do it on YouTube. You can also, of course, go to FCPRadio.com. That's my podcast. I have a new podcast coming out this week. I've been doing these podcasts for 5 years. I have never taken a break. I've always had Final Cut Pro Radio podcast out every single month. New ones coming out this week. No breaks. We're approaching 1.2 million downloads I have 2 podcasts. Final Cut Pro Radio is the one I spend most time with now. We're approaching 1.2 million downloads of my podcast. FCPX.tv. I just took you there a little while ago. that's where you'll find out all about Final Cut Pro 10.5 when it comes out. I'll have a list of articles. But I'm going to head out of here, everyone. My name's Richard Taylor, and I got some other work to do. And stay tuned. I very likely could have another version of Final Cut Pro Radio live coming up this week. We'll have to see. I do have some scheduled for next week, and stay tuned for that. But everyone, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you stopping by. Thanks a lot.